Testing. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started just for the benefit of keeping on time. My name is Dominic Babinski. I am the general manager for Abutment Direct and Dentology. This is, such an interesting time coming out of COVID, and for many of us, the first time that we're, inside many people's bubble at the same time. So it's pretty exciting to see this many people in one room, and I know that there's people that have already done that, but for a lot of us, it's the first time. So what's fun about just looking out into the room is I can see we have people who come quite a long way to be here. I don't know everybody in the room, but I know we've got some people that are here from Surrey, BC, Kamloops, BC, some people from Montreal, some people from Ottawa, and so we can see that people have come from a long way. And so I'm excited to introduce Minh Tran, who many of you know, and I'm not going to go into the usual, when he was 7 years old and this, and he graduated from this and so on. It's easy enough to know about Tran, and many of you do. And so what's exciting about working with Minh, because we do this on a regular basis, is his generosity and how willing he is to share information, those tips and tricks that everyone can benefit from. And once he's done that, also is accessibility afterwards. And I think that many people in the room have had the experience of working with and connecting with and getting help from Minh, including us, on an ongoing basis. So we're excited to be able to sponsor Minh's presentation. And Minh, it's all yours.
Okay, hello everyone. Hello. Okay, you'd think I'd be good with technology by now. Okay, hello everyone, and thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I want to say thank you to Mike and Dominic and the whole team at Abutment Direct Dentology for sponsoring this and inviting me to speak on their behalf. I also want to say thank you to DiAC and for organizing this event. Technorama is very near and dear to me. It was actually the kind of full circle of the first event I ever went to 16 years ago. And so it's nice to come here, and I feel so honored and privileged to be able to present. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Minh Tran, if the slide will advance. And I'm based out of Windsor, Ontario. Been in the industry since 2006. Spent the majority of that time behind a computer using a mouse and keyboard, primarily by designing on 3Shape. And of course, I've used a wide variety of digital technology in my time. In my spare time, I run a blog called DentalTechTips, where we focus on the latest and greatest in dental technology. So if you want to find me online or via social media, you can find me in all the usual places by liking @DentalTechTips. And usually I skip over this, and I kind of glaze over the topic, but because it's actually part of the title of today's presentation, I'm going to spend a little bit of time giving you a background on DentalTechTips and how it was founded. So very often we go to trade shows just like this one, and very often you see these speakers, these presenters who are very well known. And they're typically, I hate to say it, but they're industry mouthpieces or people who are just selling products to you. And you hear all the data, you hear all the information, it sounds really great. You get back to the lab, you order these products, and they're not necessarily as good as they claim to be. And that just never really sat right with me. Also, when I had founded DentalTechTips, this picture here was about 2014, 2015, and one of my passions, of course, is photography, cameras, and making videos. So I bought my first real big camera, and I thought I was a professional, and look at how artistic this guy is, taking pictures, right? So you spend a lot of time in the lab, right? So, of course, you take pictures and videos of things in the lab. Those are the only interesting subjects that I had. And again, full circle, very interesting. The first video I ever posted onto my YouTube channel actually was Technorama 2016. And this was kind of like a spur of the moment type thing. I didn't really think much of it. I just did it for the sake of wanting to create a video and get a little bit creative. So again, it's really nice to be presenting here and kind of, again, coming full circle. So of course, you start making little review videos of whatever you're making in the lab, little products that come through, and you catch the attention of all these different manufacturers, and they start sending you free stuff, and that's awesome, right? Who doesn't love getting free stuff? So eventually, I think I got a sponsored project that we did. It was maybe a few $100s, but with the money from that project and selling my big camera, I got to upgrade to the next camera. So I've always kind of made it a point to take any funds that I get when finishing a project to reinvest into better camera equipment. So really, DentalTechTips was founded as a way to fund my seriously unhealthy addiction to camera gear. And I mean seriously unhealthy, right? So that's on the personal side. But on the more altruistic side, DentalTechTips was founded as a way for me to give back to an industry that I've really grown up in and that's really given me a lot of opportunities. So as a source of unbiased information for dental technicians all across the world, and just using truly what's the best out there based on my own personal experience. So that's DentalTechTips kind of in a nutshell. Hopefully it paints a little bit of a better picture of why I do what I do and the products that we'll be talking about today. And really that nothing that I'm mentioning today is a sponsored content. I'm not being told to say anything. And full disclosure, I have no interests, no monetary incentives to be mentioning any of the products that I'm saying today. I just find them to be very good. So let's move on to the main topic, of course, and we're going to be talking about integrating fully digital workflows. So when you look at the word workflow, it's a very overused word in our industry today. But what is a workflow, right? When you look at a workflow, essentially what it is a set of activities or things and processes that we do to get from point A to point B. So for example, you get an impression into the lab, you want to go through your workflow to get a crown out. So I want to spend the next little while kind of giving you guys like a 30,000 foot view of what a fully digital modern workflow really looks like. So I'm going to take an example of implant companies. Implant company A here, for example, has their specific workflow. They have their own scan bodies, they have their own parts, they have their own components. You have to stock these parts, you have to inventory all this stuff, you have to know their nomenclature. Implant company B, completely different nomenclature, completely different things. Maybe they're not digital at all, you don't have scan bodies, so you have to only do it traditional way. Implant company C, for example, they have their own workflow, their own scan bodies. Maybe you can only send to them for them to produce, right? So there's all these different workflows. These are just 3 implant companies. And in the world, we have over 150. So imagine having to have an individual workflow for each one of these individual implant companies. And that's just implants alone. Now, what if we're talking about crown and bridge, removables, ortho, all the other workflows that you have inside the lab? So, of course, a lot of you, I'm sure, are already implementing some form of a digital workflow in your lab at some pace, right? So you either have maybe a Medit scanner, maybe you have a 3Shape scanner, maybe you're using Blue Sky Plan for your implant planning, maybe you have Sirona InLab for milling Emax crowns specifically, or you're using 3Shape for everything. Maybe you have an Amann Gerbach mill, maybe you have 2 roll-ins. All these things are kind of puzzle pieces that are floating in space. And they don't exist in a vacuum. They all need to work together. We need to integrate these. So what I want to focus on today is how we can take all these technologies and really integrate and streamline them so our workflows are really efficient. So the secret sauce, how do we integrate these fully digital workflows? The secret, of course, is embracing fully open systems, right? Really adopting a fully open philosophy. So again, backing up to our implant company analogy that I was just speaking about, Medentika here uses a multi-platform system, right? So they have components for all the major implant brand manufacturers, and you only need to remember one naming scheme. You only need to stock one brand of scan bodies. You only need to remember how to use this and stock all this. And realistically, I think like easily 95% of all the components that we stock in the lab are Medentika components because of this simplicity, because it's an open system, right? Another company, of course, that really embraces this open architecture, this open philosophy, of course, is the Siga. They have over 500 open materials. And I'm going to touch a little bit more on the printing and all that stuff a little bit later when we speak about that in detail. But just finding companies to work with that adopt this open philosophy just makes things much better for integrating all your fully digital workflows. So now that you're familiar with these open systems, you're able to kind of organize your thoughts a little bit better, right? So this is kind of a decision tree of what I've created. So typically in the lab, what we do is we want to make screw retain crowns because dentists like them for retrievability and they're easy to insert. So we always try to say, hey, you know what, can we screw retain this first? And almost typically always we're able to because we have angled screw channels now. So we kind of go through this. Okay, we're going to use the Medentic ASC Flex. What's the gingival height? You can use different gingival heights. Is it more than 2.5? Is it less than 2.5? Okay, we're going to use the ASC Flex. If it can't, we have different workflows that kind of all go through. So you're able to organize your thoughts, organize your processes, so you get a very streamlined workflow. And really, not just implants, but any digital workflow that you're working with can be broken down into 4 phases, right? So of course you have your diagnostic, where you do your pre-planning and communication between the dentist and lab. You have your data acquisition phase, where you get all this information from the clinic. And then this is where we spend most of our time, of course, is production and manufacturing. And finally, you want to deliver all these and do some quality assurance, making sure that you're doing a good job. So again, we're going to focus on some of the technologies in each of these individual phases and how we can streamline them and focus on some of the exciting new digital things that are coming out. So of course, when it comes to the diagnostic phase, this is the most powerful phase because it really lets you plan, right? It's a very important and critical phase if you want to ensure success. So very often we have a goal when we're working with complex cases. Let's say, for example, you want to do a full mouth rehab. Well, if you don't know what your final destination is, very much like this analogy here. I live in Windsor, which is about 4 hours away. If I woke up this morning, I set my alarm for 9 o'clock and I wanted to get out of there, but I got up at 9:30 because I decided to sleep in, I'm going to get here a half hour later than I had initially intended, right? And that's my fault for sleeping past whatever time it was, but that's no big deal. That's on me. Now, for example, if I had a vague goal next year, I'm going to go to Technorama. I don't know what date they're booking. I don't know where the venue is going to be. I'm going to go to Technorama. So you're just kind of aimlessly going about your day, right? And you don't know when you're going to get there, how you're going to arrive there. So very much like my trip up here, you punch it into Google Maps, and even if there's construction, even if there's an accident, even if there's a delay, very much like planning your cases, you know what your end goal is when you want to get there. So it just makes things a lot more predictable, and you get there much more efficiently. So let's look at some of the tools that we use in the diagnostic phase here. And first and foremost is Smile Design, which I spend a lot of time doing nowadays. And you have a variety of different softwares. You have 3Shape Smile Design, DSD, which is very famous. ExoCAD has their Smile Creator, but you could use something as simple as Photoshop. And really, when I first started doing Smile Designs, that's exactly what I did, right? You got a picture from the doctor, you popped it into Photoshop, and you just cut and mirrored and pasted it, and that's it. And you send this off to the doctor, and he shows it to the patient, and very immediately, people are very visual. They see it, they want this. Right? They don't know if you tell them, okay, well, we're going to do a little bit of connective tissue grafting here, and we're going to put a crown or a veneer, depending on how much material thickness we need there. They don't understand that. They understand, hey, you know what? This is what I look like right now. This is what I want to look like after, right? So having that visual aid is quite powerful. So, of course, my software of choice is 3Shape Smile Design. And with Smile Design, it's very simple because you just snap a couple pictures. The tools are already in everybody's pockets. Just pull out your cell phone, snap 2 pictures, and you're off to the races. And the first dental tech tip for today is how to take these photos. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your camera is on the same plane when taking these photos, right? What happens is when you're going from a full smile because you want a full facially driven design, you want to make sure that your smile is also retracted but at the same plane, not introducing some kind of inverted smile line or some kind of perspective distortion. So if you're doing this with a cell phone, have the patient stand against the wall, have them hold their head straight, take your cell phone, hold it right up to their mouth, and then back up. Elbows to your body so you're nice and stable, and back up until you see their full face and snap the picture. Have them reset, put the retractors in, put the phone all the way up, same position, and step back until you see the smile and snap a picture. If you're doing this with the camera, you have flashes and all this other stuff, so it's a little bit more unmanageable, but same thing. You want to be all the way, and then you want to make sure that you're on the same plane. If you have a little bit of trouble with the patient kind of moving the head, because when they put the retractors in, they go like this, right? And then you get this inverted smile line. Have them stand against the wall with an empty Kleenex box and have them hold it there, right? And that's going to help with keeping the same position from one to the other. If you're really short, make sure that you get a step stool or something, or one of those cameras with a tilty flippy screen so you can see the patient. If you're really tall, make sure that you're sitting down or the patient is standing on the stool so you're not pointing down and introducing unnecessary perspective distortion. So of course, smile design is very straightforward. Once you get in the software, you just kind of, it's like paint by numbers, right? You go through, it has all these different markers and all these different steps that you go through, and you just follow and you find what looks the best based on the patient's face, their facial planes, and really just creating a mock-up, and it'll just spit out these videos and images. So once you're done with that, what do? If the patient accepts, then you'll move on to your 3D digital diagnostic. And the digital diagnostic is a very powerful tool and probably where I spend the majority of my day. With digital diagnostics, I can impersonate extremely talented technicians who have digitized their libraries. So I can use a non-DIS library, I can use a Shemic library, and I'm using the best library that's best suited for that specific patient, not necessarily what I'm only capable of producing. So of course, dental tech tip number 2 is how we actually create these digital diagnostics in 3Shape. So in 3Shape, you're gonna go in here, create a new order form, and you're gonna wanna select digital impression up here. And don't worry if you have a scanned-in model, if it's an impression, if it's a digital impression. The reason that we're choosing digital impression here is because we want this indication to be enabled, right? If it's not a digital impression, it's not gonna allow you to select model, and then you won't be able to build your model for your diagnostic. So up here, digital impression, select model. So now what you do is you select all the teeth, go here, temporary unprepared, that's the indication that you're gonna use. You're gonna bridge all these together, again, making sure that this is a digital impression. If it's not gonna have that model, and you're gonna select that. Enter in all the patient information. And if you've already scanned in your order, when you hit OK, it's gonna ask you, do you wanna rescan? Don't rescan, it's just that you wanna pass this through so you can make a diagnostic. So now that we import all of our scans in, we're gonna go ahead and do our 3D digital diagnostic. And the reason I like this indication is because you're really just setting up individual pontics. You don't worry about margins, you're not worrying about dye space, you're not worrying about contacts or anything like that. What I'm doing here is that it's allowing me like a very free-form design where I'm able to play with the design, right? I'm able to say, hey, you know what, does this patient need to open their video? Do I need to adjust something? Do we need to do crown lengthening? Maybe the patient will benefit from an implant, maybe an ortho, and you get to go back and forth and really play in a free-form manner, right? And I can whip out full upper and lower diagnostic in 40 minutes easily, like a full mouth. Now, if I want to, I could make rectangular-looking teeth, oval-looking teeth, more triangular-looking teeth, and I can print off 3, 4 different variations. Could you imagine waxing up 4 full mouths by hand? It would be ridiculous, right? So you're kind of stuck and you go, oh, here, doctor, this is my wax up. And they go, okay, well, it's okay. But here you have a whole bunch of different options. The other so with digital diagnostics, and compared to doing them by hand, you're just objectively much, much better. If you make a mistake or while you're designing, you can undo it. If you add a distal line angle in wax and it looks good and then you start building everything else around it and the teeth look kind of bulky, you're a little bit biased there because you spent a little bit more time on that, not necessarily because it looks good for the patient, but because you spent time on it, right? So we were invested into what we've designed. So when you're doing it this way, if I don't like it, I just cut it, keep sculpting, and I go, oh, you know what, I actually did like it, I'll step back 15 steps. And it's no harm, no foul, because it makes me an objectively better technician, I would like to think. So again, how do we integrate these 2 steps that we just spoke about? How do we integrate our smile design with our 3D diagnostic? So of course, in 3Shape, they have this neat tool, it's called the Realview Engine, which you're able to take those 2D smile designs, bring them in, superimpose them onto the patient's 3D models, and you're able to get a facially driven design. So, you know what, maybe you looked at the patient, you said, hey, you know what, an oval look looks a little bit better for them, that's what I'm gonna think. And you start designing it, and you look at their existing dentition, and you design it to that. But the moment you put their face on it and you superimpose it there, you're gonna say, hey, you know what, that doesn't work. And you're able to change it then. Of course, all this leads to increased effectiveness and communication between the clinic and the lab. So this is great because, and this is dental tech tip number 3. I'm going to explain this a little bit later, but basically when you do these types of perio guides here, you want to do a suck down thermoform rather than 3D printing one. So this one here is an example of increased effectiveness in communication. So of course we see the patient, the doctor sees the patient, and of course their chief complaint is, I don't like how gummy my smile is. So very easily we say, okay, well she's probably going to need crown lengthening. So I bring it into my smile design digital diagnostic, and I assess. I go, hey, you know what? I think she's going to need roughly 1.5 to 2 millimeters on the centrals and the laterals. We could probably just do like a sub-G prep on the canines and just to push that gingiva, and we'll probably get a good result, right? So that's what we do. So the doctor says, hey, let's do that. Can you make me a perio guide? And back in the day, we used to do these where you'd design them on the model and you'd cut these little windows out using the custom tray. But I didn't like that because it wasn't as accurate to what I wanted to design. So I'm a huge proponent of doing things as digitally as you possibly can. But sometimes doing something digitally isn't necessarily the best way or the most efficient way to do it. So if you can do it faster and more efficiently in a traditional manner, then do it that way. So what I did, of course, was we had the mock-up, patient liked it, and now I take my design back in and I just cut it right here. And this is right above the height of contour because this gives me a nice positive stop exactly where I want it to go, right? So now, of course, I go through and I make a suck down thermoform, zip out all these little windows. The doctor brings it to the patient. She had some swelling of the gums. I think there was like a reaction to the freezing there. So this was really blanched, so the doctor made a decision to just put it in there and mark it with a permanent marker. And then she freehanded it with a laser, right? So then once the patient's all healed up, we do everything. We got the final impression. This is my design here, and this is the final result, right? So you can pretty immediately appreciate the difference between what was before and after. And this was a very predictable outcome based on that initial communication. So of course, I kind of skipped ahead with some of the steps there, but the next step, of course, is data acquisition. We did do some data acquisition. We did do some delivery. So all these phases aren't rigid. It's not like you follow from step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. They kind of move back and forth. It goes to the clinic. It comes back to us. So there's little tiny workflows in between in different phases that you have to go through. So, of course, in the past, something like taking a PVS is a form of data acquisition. Pulling your cell phone out, taking a picture, that's a form of data acquisition. Nowadays, with digital, you obviously think of things like intraoral scanners, right? So an intraoral scanner, I'm not going to go into too much detail about them. You have a whole bunch here, and then the simple summary is you get what you pay for, right? If you buy an $80,000 scanner, it's going to be much better than a $10,000 scanner. Not always the case. There are some really great value ones as well. There's always exceptions to the rule, but that's pretty much how it goes. So of course, when it comes to the lab side of things, we have all these portals. We have all these different ways to receive these digital impressions, right? So what you want to make sure that you as a technician, kind of being a little bit self-serving, is make sure you're able to advise your clients, right? Hey, you know what, you want to do a little bit more research. If you want to do more Invisalign, you probably want to go more iTero. If you want to do in-office milling, I'm not sure why a technician would tell them to do that, but they would probably want to go Sirona. If you want, and you're already using 3Shape, you probably want to, and you're very comfortable with it, they want a very good scanner and they want to work with you, maybe you recommend a Trios to them. So of course, be very specific towards their needs and making sure that you're able to also work with whatever system it is. You don't want to recommend a scanner and then lose a client as a result. So be a little bit self-serving when trying to communicate these things. Of course, here on our tour, ladies and gentlemen, you see the dental technician in its natural habitat, checking in all the cases from all the various portals. I'm sure anybody who's working with a whole bunch of different digital impression scanners can feel this pain. We actually have somebody who spends a big chunk of their day just doing this, downloading all these different things, right? So the question is, how do we integrate all these digital inboxes, right? Because it's a very, very severe bottleneck, I feel, for a lot of labs. So companies, of course, like 3Shape, like Sirona, have heard user feedback, and they realize that there is a pain point there. So they've actually announced recently that they have this third-party iOS integration. So companies like 3Shape, like Dentsply, Sirona are now cooperating so that they can integrate. So if you have a 3Shape Communicate account, you're able to hook into the Dentsply Sirona API. It's not a free feature. You do have to pay for both licenses to be able to use it, and it is still very much in its infancy. There are some bugs. 3Shape is known to have bugs when they first release things. So proceed with caution, but it's very promising to see that this is something that is happening, right? We're getting integration on this level. So, of course, currently, if you're doing anything, like if you're importing things, what you can do to streamline is make sure you're importing things the proper way, right? So this is an older interface for iTero. They've updated it a little bit since then, but a lot of people aren't using it properly. So iTero gives you all these different types of import options, right? So when you select here, it gives you all these different ones. For 3Shape specifically, you want to choose a 3Shape option. A lot of people don't do this because they say, oh, well, I can't build a model, or it gives me this separate die, and then what happens is the model isn't buildable, so they choose an unsectioned die. But iTero's already gone through the trouble of marking the margin for you. So what you really need to do is you need to export this as a folder method and then import it in as the proper way. So I'm going to scrub through this video very quickly, just because it is a little bit long. But basically, you go into your 3Shape Dental Manager, and you're going to choose the iTero folder method, and you're going to choose that iTero folder and import it in. And the reason for this is because it brings in this PTS file, it brings in all this XML data, it brings in the models, and it preserves that ditch and that margin that they've done. So now you're going to go through, you're going to enter in your order form, make sure you select model, do all that stuff, and you're going to mark your margin, and it saves that PTS right there, and you're going to go create your crown. And when you go to build your model, it's going to actually generate a die based off of that PTS. So this is a lot more efficient than if you were to import manually, have to remark the margin that iTero already did for you. So that this kind of saves you a little bit of time in streamlining currently. So of course, there's other forms of data acquisition. Some of the newer exciting ones are things like face scanning here. So face scanning is very exciting. Bellis used to be a very good program. Very nice because it was just something you could put on an iPhone, download the app, and just pay for the subscription, right? And it's very compelling because everybody had it in their pocket, basically. But unfortunately, Bellis has discontinued the app, and I haven't found a very good mobile alternative yet. Companies like Zirconium have their Face Hunter system, Canfield Science has the Vectra H2, and Shining 3D has the scanner, which is a little bit more budget, but also they're all dedicated and they're all in the thousands of dollars, right? So it's kind of a shame that we don't have that easily accessible one, but hopefully something comes out soon. And it's not just a novelty, right? Because when you look at the smile design, the ability to overlay a 2D photo with a 3D model, now you're aligning things, right? You're able to assess the condyles, you're able to turn it and see how it looks with the face. So from different angles, and it's very subtle. But the other nice thing is, for example, if you're doing a paraoral scan and you have the patient fully retracted, and you're doing something like a bone reduction guide, or you need to do anchor pins, what you can do then is you're able to visualize how far down these anchor pins can go without impinging on the cheeks and the lips and everything like that. So there is some functional value to it, not just kind of a novelty of it's a 3D face scan for the sake of a 3D face scan. Another exciting technology is photogrammetry, things like the PIC and iMetric. If you're not aware of what this is, it's a scanner that's able to pick up these markers that have these checkered markers, and it picks it up very quickly in less than a minute, and it works really well, especially in full arch scans. So if you're working on like all on X cases, lots of fully edentulous spans, you probably want to look into something like this. The only downside is it doesn't capture the surface scan, so you will need to grab a surface scan from something like a Trios and merge the two together. But it's very nice because anybody who's tried to scan cross arch with existing technology, soft tissue is not, it's very soft, it's very movable, it's not very reliable when the scanner's trying to look for. What the scanner's trying to look for is teeth, right? It wants ridges, it wants all these hard anatomical markers. So dental tech tip number 5, of course, is when you're scanning something that's fully edentulous cross arch, very much like when we were taking these open tray impressions, you'd splint all those impression copings together, and then you'd flow some composite for rigidity. For this purpose, we're not doing it for rigidity. We're doing it because this composite will act as like a hard marker, right? The software gets very confused with soft tissue, it'll understand the composite a little bit better. So what you want to do though is you want to avoid the tops of these scan bodies, and you really want to avoid any any of the indicating the markers there on the indexing surfaces. Another form of data acquisition is digital shade matching. So of course we have it can be broken down into two methods. You have your photographic method here, and then you have another method that uses a device called the photospectrometer, something like the Beta Easy shade. So the photographic method, of course, most famously in the eLab Prime, the protocol by Sascha Hein. They also have one called Matisse, which is also very, very popular. And both of these use what's called a gray reference card and some photopolarizers to give you a very objective way of matching these. They also have software that you pair with them, and they give you very specific mixes for porcelains and things like that. You can check, you can do virtual try-ins. This, of course, is really great because it further fuels my unhealthy addiction to cameras, and I get to play around with photography all day at work. But yeah, it's a very powerful, again, objective way of doing shade matching, right? Anybody who's done shade matching, and in the afternoon you say, hey, you know what, there's a shade adjust on a single central, and you 2-3 bakes, and it's still not quite right, and you got all these other cases. It can really ruin your day, right? And the basis of this whole thing is it's based on the CIELAB color space. Not groundbreaking stuff. They've been using this technology in Home Depot for like 40 years to match your paint colors, right? So it's not like it's groundbreaking, but it's an objective way of doing it. And the very basics of it is this axis here, the L axis, represents, if you took this picture and it was just black and white, how white or how black each individual pixel or area on that photo is. This A-axis, for the sake of dentistry, because we don't have green really, is just how much red there is on that axis. And then, of course, on this axis here, how much yellow there is. We do have some blue, but very rarely it's going to be in the positive values. And based on just that information alone, you're able to add, subtract, and play with the colors to get a very objective result. On the photospectrometer method, you have a device like the Beta Easy shade. You also have something called the OptiShade, and I think it's being sold by Smileline. And this actually pairs with Matisse software, so it's almost like a hybrid of the two. And the photospectrometer, what it does is it actually measures the teeth, and it spits out a color, right? So this is the actual iPhone app. You can put it on there and capture the shade. If you have something like a Trio scanner, it actually has a built-in photospectrometer in there, right? So you're able to pick color straight off of the tooth. You're able to pick stump shades right off of the scan. But I don't rely specifically on this, and I don't rely specifically just on photos, and that comes up in the next slide here. Dental tech tip number 6. If you're going to do custom shade matching, keep in mind that teeth can dehydrate in as little as 2 minutes after exposure to air. And this patient actually shows a very, very good example of that. So if you're picking from an intraoral scanner, right, and the teeth are dehydrated after prepping, and you pull the stump shade, you pull the teeth shade, you don't know that those teeth are dehydrated. So you could have a value that's 2, 3, 4 times brighter than what the final shade should be. So if you're doing custom shades, or if the clinic is taking these custom shades or photos, make sure that they're doing it at the beginning of the appointment before they ever start prepping. Or if you're getting them in the lab, make sure that you're doing these at least 24 hours after a prep appointment to make sure that the teeth are really fully rehydrated in order to get a good result, right? Because you can see here she was like a 1-in-1 here, but by the time she was finished prepping, she's like way, way into the bleach shades there, right? Okay, so how do we integrate digital shade matching into our workflows here, right? What you do is, the big thing for me is a virtual try-in. So what you're doing here is, again, because it's a gray reference card, because you have control of lights, you're able to take a picture of the patient using a photo protocol, and you're able to control that same lighting at the bench and taking the same photo protocol and bringing it in. I like using the Photoshop method just because it's a little bit more manual. But if you're using the eLab Prime or the Matisse software, you can actually just bring this into their software, and they automate this quite a bit more. Another form of data acquisition is patient-specific motion, right? So this is more on the functional side. Things like the Zebras JMA from Aman Gerbach. 3Shape has patient-specific motion, and we'll speak a little bit about a CBCT patient-specific articulator as well. So if you're working with a company like Aman Gerbach, they fully integrate with the Zebras JMA wireless FaceBow. This FaceBow is really nice because it actually can export that XML data to other programs like ExoCAD and all that XML data. 3Shape approaches this a little bit different in that they use technology called patient-specific motion. So they're actually capturing video of that patient's motion, and you're able to take that data, bring it into your design so you can actually follow and check your excursive movements. So you're not only getting, when you're integrating all this, again, you're not getting just facially driven, but you're getting functionally correct data as well. And a very nice and cool protocol that was recently published in the JPD, this one here actually, they're taking CBCT volume data of the patient's condyles of their mandible, and they're converting that into an STL volume that they 3D print, and they kind of align it in software so that it has the proper relation between the patient's actual skull and the cast, and they mount it onto an articulator. And if you look at an articulator, yeah, they may have that 100 millimeter, 110 intracondylar bond wheel distance, but those condyles themselves are round. But if you look at the condyles for a patient, that's like almost ovular or kind of like a shape of a fist, right? So doing this, you're actually able to replicate the patient's condylar pathways much, much more accurately. So how do we integrate all of this data that we've captured, right? So what my favorite tool in recent years in 3Shape specifically is their additional scans tool. And the reason for this is because if I were to take a 3D face scan, I would bring it in and I'd line it up using that additional scans tool. If I had that CBCT volume data that I converted to an STL, I'd bring it into this software here, align the skull to the casts, do everything like that, and then output it in that proper alignment. So using a tool like this to align everything, relate all your casts, correlate everything together, that's how you really integrate all this scan data and make sure that you're working together in the proper orientation. And then, of course, in the lab, we have the desktop 3D scanners, which have been around for forever, right? They're very mature at this point. My choice of scanner, of course, is 3Shape scanners. In the lab, we have a few of these scanners. We've been using them forever. If your clients are still using PBS impressions, then of course this is how you get this into your digital workflow. We find that we are using our scanners much less and less because more doctors are buying intraoral scanners. We're probably 60% digital, 40% traditional. So, and I see this trend just continuing to go where, we will always have a desktop scanner in the lab for the sake of scanning different things in, but I do see them being used less and less as time goes on and more people adopt digital impression scanners. So then, of course, now that we have all this data, we can start producing crowns, dentures, all these different things, right? And this is where we spend the majority of our time. So CAD software is a very critical component of the production and manufacturing stage, especially for these fully digital workflows. So you need to feed it into some kind of CAD software. It could be 3Shape, ExoCAD, Sirona. It doesn't really matter what you use. It's just whatever works best for you and for the best choice, right? I'm a very big 3Shape guy, but I really like Blue Sky Bio for implant planning. I use Mesh Mixer a million times a day to fix things in 3Shape. I've used Sirona in the past. Dental Wings, I love them because, it's a Canadian thing. You got to cheer them on, but I've never used them. So, But one very cool thing about CAD software and on the CAD side is 3Shape recently introduced 3Shape Automate last year, actually. And this is cool because what they're doing is they're leveraging AI to design crowns. And a lot of people get really scared and freaked out. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job to a machine, right? But it's not something that I worry about because if you're anything like me, any given day you have 20 cases sitting on your bench, right? And it could be full mouth rehab, all on X's, aesthetic cases, single centrals. So all this bread and butter stuff that pays the bills and single crowns is still very important. But you know what? 3Shape Automate, what it does is it produces those automatically, so I can focus on these bigger cases, these more fun cases. 3Shape also introduced night guards and a whole bunch of other improvements to their Automate platform, so you can automate night guards. I hope they can automate models very soon because it's such a pain, right? I wrote an article actually last year in IDT about this exactly. So if you want to read the article explaining how the technology actually works, send me an email or look me up online, and I can send you a link to that article to read. again, how do we integrate this AI into our lab? How do we integrate it into our workflow? So basically, every single crown, anything that's like a posterior that doesn't require attention, we feed it into Automate. Automatically, it goes into 3Shape Automate. And the nice thing is, you only pay for what you download, right? So it's not like if you upload 300 cases and you reject 150, you only pay for the 150. So even if you have to design them, no harm, no foul, you're not paying for anything that you're not using. Right? So it's nice because there's no real loss there. So everything goes through 3Shape Automate for us. If it doesn't work and it gets rejected, then we'll go ahead and we'll redesign it ourselves so it matches our criteria. So an excellent way of integrating AI into your workflow. When it comes to milling, this is a very, very mature segment, of course. This is the most reliable way to produce anything in the lab for the past few decades now. And it won't always be the case because additive technologies are really, really catching up, and they probably will surpass to the point where the majority of most stuff in the future in dentistry will probably be made in an additive manner. So, but for the next decade, milling is going to be very, very safe. So don't throw your thing away and invest in a printer only, right? You're going to be still milling zirconia, metal, and all this glass ceramics and all that stuff. So the biggest thing, again, I'm going to emphasize here, if you want to integrate all this stuff, is you want to work with companies that embrace that open philosophy, right? There are a few holdouts there, but over the past 2 decades, us as consumers, we've really told the manufacturers, hey, you know what, we want to be able to choose what we want to work with. So you really want to have materials, and back in the day when this is me actually in 2006, when we first got our first mill, and you could only use discs from the company, and it had RFID scanners. There was all these hoops you had to jump through, and you could only do that. I remember we were trying to rescan one, and I was trying to jump through a bunch of different hoops. But of course, nowadays, if you can get any one of these mills and use any one of these discs and throw them into any of these mills, because the open philosophy has really just permeated through and become very, very ubiquitous. So of course, something like a company, Amann Girbach, who was very, very famously very, very closed, and they only wanted you to use all their stuff. They actually recently announced on social media that they're integrated with the iVotion system now, right? So if you have an Amann Girbach mill, you're able to mill not iVotion the multi, but you can at least mill iVotion dent, right? So this is another example of companies playing together nicely, and us being the ones who kind of determined that. So dental tech tip number 7 here, if you're a Roland user, this is a fun one. Let's play this here. I'm going to probably scrub through it a little bit. Very easily, usually what you get is this little tool here. If you want to, when you get a new burr, you got to put it into this little jig here, and then you got to put the little sleeves on. Those ones there. I'm going to scrub through this video because it is not very, very long. But so basically, you have to put the burr in there, and then there's this little window, and the burr just needs to fall somewhere in between there. It's very vague. I like precise things. I don't like, guessing where the burr is, and what if it's a little bit different from one burr to the next. So I've always liked a much more definite way of doing it. So what you do is you set one burr inside of this little jig here, and you screw it in, you make sure it's all nice and solid. And then you grab the actual tool holder. The one that I'm using is from Sierra. Oops. And you cut the base of it so it matches the height of where you set that burr. So now every time that you want to work with it, you just take a new burr, set it in there, grab a ring, put it on, and screw it on. So rather than eyeballing and having to go through and making sure that maybe it's a little bit off, maybe you get a much more definite and quicker way of switching out your burrs for your Roland. So just put it in there, and it's good. So dental tech tip number 7, if you have a Roland mill. 3D printing, this is the big one. It's like a gold mine that all these companies are rushing to, right? This is there's a lot of excitement in this space. Jumping off from our previous point, work with a company that adopts the open material system, right? So a company like Asiga, who has over 500 validated materials. I love working with them because, you know what? If Asiga, they have a very good model material, but you know what? Maybe their denture material isn't very good. If I'm in a locked system, I'm locked to what that company tells me I'm able to do, right? So working with a company like Asiga where they have all these validated resins, where they have, and you just go on the website, download the configuration file, and toss it on your printer. It's just super, super easy. And actually speaking with a lot of chemical engineers, lots of different developers for all these different resins, they typically validate their resins first on Asiga printers, and a lot of them would only like to validate on Asiga printers. They kind of begrudgingly validate on other printers out of being with the market and working with a whole bunch of different platforms. But the technology, the software itself, I'm not going to go too much into detail about it, but you're able to do multi-stacking, you're able to do multi-material printing, you're able to do multi-range printing, so it's speeding things up, slowing things down. It's very flexible, very powerful software. And again, because of that open philosophy, if I want to print, I don't actually have any examples of it, but what we're doing now is you can print, denture colored resin, stop it with multi-range, and then print tooth colored resin, right? So it's very cool, and they're just absolutely great printers. They're the best selling printers for a reason, right? It's because they just absolutely work. So again, in terms of materials, if you're still doing this for your zirconia, don't do that, right? Full monolithic is here nowadays, you know what I mean? Like if this here is the design that I did inside the software with all this. And this is literally milled out of the machine and just a layer of glaze. So I replicated this exactly in that. And with these full monolithic materials, you're able to get nearly as good results as hand layer. I'm not going to say all the time. There's obviously a bunch of nuances and characteristics that you don't get from hand layering, right? But the reason for that is because zirconia has evolved, right? Materials have evolved. So now what you see very often is 3Y, 4Y, 5Y zirconia. So what's that Y stand for? That's yttrium molecules that they've used to stabilize the zirconia. And as they cram in more yttrium molecules, it does result in more translucency in the material, right? At the detriment of the material being slightly weaker. It's rivaling something like Emax nowadays in terms of translucency, but still being much, much stronger. The latest generation of zirconia is actually, they use this very creative way of doing things where they have the base layers in a much stronger 3Y zirconia, and then the incisor or the enamel layers are done in a 5Y. So it's almost like a gradation of both strength and translucency. So very cool and something that makes these materials very, very, very great. And on the 3D printing side, we're still very much in its infancy, right? So back in the day, like I said, you had to have RFID readers for your zirconia. Nowadays, if anybody puts an RFID reader on their zirconia, they might as well just stop selling zirconia. But these three companies are the ones that I really like working with. Asiga has great model material. Keystone makes it a point to really be validated for. They want to be the materials company, right? And DTAX makes a bunch of great materials as well. And if I were stuck in a closed system, right, and Asiga wanted to say, hey, you know what, we want to sell more splint resin, and I couldn't print key splint soft, that's not great, right? Then I'm losing to my competitor. If Keystone starts making temp material that's better than the DTAX I'm currently using, well, then I'll switch to Keystone, right? So you want to make sure that you're working with companies that really adopt this open material philosophy because, again, this is how it's going to go. So finally, we've produced some crowns, dentures, we printed off stuff, milled, whatever. We've reached the delivery and quality assurance phase of things, right? So this is and again, like I said, you could be delivering something as small as a provisional or like a mock-up or something like that, or a perio guide, surgical guide. And it might have to come back to the lab. So maybe it was a try, maybe something else. So quality assurance and communication after this phase is very key as well. So this example here, for example, I designed like a diagnostic. We did some perio, and the doctor's finally doing some prepping. So I printed off some prep guides. So this is being delivered to the doctor's office here. So these are the 3D printed prep guides. And this is the final result here. Another example, of course, here we do the 3D diagnostic. I do a silicone matrix, send that to the doctor. This is the before. This is kind of the after model here. They do the mock-up in the mouth. And very immediately, the patient, you can kind of appreciate the drastic difference here. So you really need to communicate better between clinician and lab, right? So this final dental tech tip, and how I'll kind of close things off here, is 3Shape Web Viewer, right? So it's not a real big secret, but the 2022 version of 3Shape will include a web viewer. Before all that, I did create a web viewer hack on my own because I wanted 3Shape to have something to compete with all the other guys. So basically this final dental tech tip here, and how we're going to close off, is a tutorial for a browser-based color 3D preview. So you have something like full contour here. This looks like a cartoon, basically, right? You send this to your doctor. It's not that great. You have other web viewers and different things, and they're not all that great. They have like purple colors and all these different colors that aren't representative of teeth. This is close, but again, it's not very good. So there's got to be a better way. So of course, I did my diagnostic from that case earlier. And what we do is we create this order form, we go through, do our diagnostic that we did earlier. And now what you want to do is you want to go to Advanced, Explore Order, and you're going to find this little folder here called CAD. And once you build that model, it's going to spit out these files here. And they're DCM files. And DCM files in 3Shape preserve the data and they preserve the color. So what you do is you have, this is the upper and lower of that. And you're going to open up 3Shape Communicate. At the time now, it's 3Shape Unite. This workflow will still work for now, but once you get 3Shape Web Viewer, don't worry about it. Use that. It'll be much better. But you're going to go through. You're going to select whatever clinic that you want to send it to for them to preview. I'm going to choose a crown, just a single crown. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to import our scan. So we grab that folder where those models we built earlier, and we're going to import our upper scan. We're going to import our lower scan. If we want to import the pre-preps, so to show what the pre-preps were, we can import that as well. And then it's giving us some check marks so we can go to the send window. So here we have the model, and we go ahead, send. So now we're sending the case. And very quick, and then what we're going to do is, oops. Play. And then you get a notification in my inbox here. I forgot my passwords. Okay, so when you get into the portal here, it's going to say, hey, no images. But if you tell your client to click on the 3D view here, in the web viewer, they're able to go in here and see full color scans and manipulate it on their web viewer. This only works if they have a Communicate account, but it's really nice because it gives them a very nice presentation that they can see, okay, you know what, this is what the diagnostic model is going to look like. They don't need to install any software, and it's just based on a web browser. Once 3Shape does release their latest version, you'll be able to preview it on your phone as well. But yeah, this is a very nice workflow, and again, this was that case from earlier. So I think I threw a lot of information out there. Hopefully I gave you guys some information that you found useful and something to kind of whet your appetite for streamlining your workflows. If you want to continue the conversation online, do send me an email, dentaltechtips@gmail.com, or find me on social media. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for your time.
There's a form being passed around. I don't know if I got through to everybody, but if you decide you want CE credits, it's back here now, I think. Who's got the sign form? It's full? Second page? Okay, right in the back. Turn the page over. Right in the back.
Any questions? How's it going?
I'm Pavel. We know each other.
Of course. Yeah, I'm at Spectrum. I saw you as well, right?
But I guess I used to live in Windsor, as I've been working in the Ontario Ceramist at that time.
Okay.
And but now I'm in London.
Okay.
I used to be 12 years now. I'm just looking for my card to pass you. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Good job.
Shoot me a message online. Say it. We can do that. No worries.
What do you say?
Thank you.
All right, I'll text you.
Yeah, of course. Shoot me a text.
Yeah, sorry.
Of course. Any interest coming to Windsor?
Yeah.
Any interest coming back to Windsor?
Well, when I go to see my parents and my family there,
Okay,
yeah, I'll stop by there.
Okay, yeah. Give me a ring if you're ever in town.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great presentation.
Awesome. Hey.
Joseph, pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Amazing presentation.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
And Joseph is running a lab for his wife was a dentist. They had 3 clinics.
Nice.
He's got a roll and mill, form lab printer. Workflow's been a big conversation. Me from the lab side, him kind of coming into it green. So I just wanted to sort of personally connect you because I think this was so important for them to be here for that.
Totally love your philosophy of the open architecture.
Yeah.
My background is actually software as well,
Okay.
so I totally
Yeah.
connect on that. Amazing. I definitely would love to get a good view going forward.
For sure, for sure.
As Lori's pointed out, we're just starting right now.
Okay.
We have our first mill, we started into our 3D printing foray, but I think you opened my eyes a lot with the aesthetic printers.
Well, I'm glad.
Amazing around the material technology and validating the resins. That's always been a bit of a concern for myself, especially heading down the road
Yep.
with some of the newer resins coming out. Like I know Model 3 version resin from Formlabs. I know there's a calibration tool. That really got me a little bit scared around, around resins of that sort. But yeah, I really appreciate your presentation. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Devin, how's it going?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to. Well, we saw each other earlier a little bit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to say it was great. It's
Thank you.
awesome.
Appreciate it.
You know, I really enjoy it. I used to do this for Loma Linda, and so I love all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now that I'm at Vita, I don't see the bench as much anymore, but yeah, a lot of guys really do this, and this is really well done.
Nice, nice.
Thanks for the shout out, to us.
I appreciate. Yeah, no, for sure, for sure.
And I just say, if you ever need anything from us, hey, let me know. Man.
Great,
But,
great. Yeah.
Congratulations, it was awesome.
Thank you, thank you. Appreciate it.
job.
Yeah. Hey.
Very nice lecture.
Thank
Ahmed.
you. Yes, yes.
How are you?
Good, good. How you doing?
Very well, very
Yeah.
well. Very nice lecture.
Thank you, thank you.
Impressive.
I raised the heart.
So one question I have in mind.
Yes.
I got the ELAB software a year ago.
Okay.
I bought everything. I've tried it. It worked a little bit. I have lots of questions. Sasha, it's hard to communicate. I'm a lab owner. I have 15 people. I have two ceramists. I couldn't convince my ceramist to actually, because I wanted to.
Yeah,
produce.
yeah.
And I'm the only one. I take shades, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So I canceled my subscription. I still have the.
You have all the equipment,
I have
though.
the equipment.
Exactly.
I have
yeah.
the polarized. I have the gray card. I want to simplify it so other people can understand.
Yeah.
I do understand, right? But you have to play around.
You have
with
to, you have to push them to do it, right? So
Right.
yeah.
So, in your opinion, is it enough to use Lightroom or Photoshop?
I like it better.
You like it
I like it better, but it's manual, right? It depends. It depends on the person. I have a friend. They have one ceramist uses Matisse because they like that one better.
Right.
The other one uses ELAB because they like that better, right? Everybody that I speak to, they like the color wheel and Photoshop, the ones that really work with it, right? Because you have to understand the concept. If you're just using the software, you don't necessarily get the most benefit because you don't know the foundation. Right?
The LAB, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
In addition to the value.
Exactly. So it's very complicated. Ceramists say that they don't understand software, right? So that's why there needs to be a lot of training.
They opposed it.
Yeah.
They fought with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
They
They go,
don't
yeah.
I said, what do you mean mix bleach 1 or 0? I said, just do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it does work.
It
right?
works. Yeah.
So,
Do you have the charts as well? The mixing, because they have the recipes as well.
well, that comes with the software?
Not with the software, but the old ones. They had them on spreadsheet.
No, I don't.
Okay. Reach out to me. I'll get that to you. Because that way you can just use Photoshop, and I mean it's not that as expensive, right?
Right, yeah. It's
Because then you have the recipes. It's manual, but at least you have the
It's
option.
not just the money, it's the fact that you're going to convince them that it works.
Yeah.
If it works, if they use it, I'm happy to spend the money because, one custom shape, one
Yeah.
crown sometimes goes back and forth so many times you would be pulling your hair out. I'm not
Exactly.
making money. I might just take your money back and please leave.
Yep. No, for sure. Totally. So, you know what? The other thing is make sure you speak with, have you had an ELAB trainer?
No,
No?
not even.
So you could speak with either Leon, are you in Toronto?
I'm in Ottawa.
In Ottawa? So maybe, I don't know if you know Shireen. She's in Quebec. And what's the other guy's name? He's very busy though. But Leon, he's an ELAB trainer as well. So yeah, Leon Gergov. So have them come to your lab to actually do the training with your people, right? because then they can kind of teach them a little bit more. It's like somebody outside, maybe they learn a little bit more. You know what I mean?
Because it's going to be me. I can't answer the phone if I'm doing the work.
Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
basically just taking all my time.
This is the list what we're doing for CE points. Who is taking that list?
The list, I think they're holding on to it. You guys are holding on to the list, right? Yeah.
Do you have those lectures recorded, right?
Of course.
Do you share it?
Always. Always, yeah.
Always.
Always online. We'll see. Always, yeah.
Well, this is awesome because in this time, in this age, if you don't do this, you don't exist.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
I mean, and I'm glad that people like yourself are trying to put things together.
Yeah, well, you have to push the industry, you know what I mean?
I forgot to take a photo. Show it to Quinn. How much people there's in the room.
That was quite impressive.
Yeah.
Nice
That's good.
meeting you again.
Nice meeting you. Yeah, if you have any questions, reach out to me.
I will.
Yeah.
Quinn, you need any help? Anything?
Huh?
You need any help?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I have cards somewhere.
So,
Thank you. Thank you.
okay, so
Yeah. I'm gonna go see Mike Gerard now for the keynote.